Hi guys, and welcome to my next battle report for Geeky Goblins. This is the third battle report in the Call to Arms tournament, round 5, and today I shall be facing Trevor Younghusband in a control game. Trevor is from Australia and we never played before. It's an 1800 point game, so let's see how it went. Enjoy the show. In this video, I'll be taking you through my Call to Arms round 5 game against Trevor Younghusband. In this video, we're going to talk about the lists we both took, which were set at 1800 points for this round, and a little about the armies, strengths and weaknesses, etc. We're going to look at the scenario, which was control, and the terrain, which is pre-generated for each round of Call to Arms, and they've been pretty interesting so far. We'll look at the deployment of both armies and the plan that I hoped to enact throughout the game, and we'll look at the game turn by turn with an action replay at the end, and finally we'll conclude with the winner and see if there are any lessons that I could take from the game. This battle was part of the Call to Arms Worldwide 5 event, round 5. We'll be using the Universal Battle 2 system and playing with the Kings of War rule set 3. Myself and Trevor have never met before, although Trevor's last game was filmed on the Dash 28 webcast, so I suspect he's going to be a good player. Trevor is from Australia. I often play a gentleman from Australia, so it'll be interesting to see how he compares to his compatriots. Right, so let's have a look at the lists we took. So we agreed that we would play the recommended level, which was 1800 points, but we didn't discuss what army we would be taking until we revealed the armies just before the game. I suspected Trevor might take Nightstalkers, and he'd taken it in the previous round. I was quite pleased to see his list, although it was a good one. So in Trevor's list, he has firstly a high unit strength of 21 and units of 14, which and they're all scoring, which is very good for the control scenario. He's gone for 3 Scarecrow regiments, either using them as chaff or to control table quarters. Then 4 troops of Reapers, who are very hard hitting but very vulnerable. He's then gone for 2 Phantoms to offer some range support and maybe get around the back of my army. And then 2 Hordes of Butchers, who are very solid and can grind well. Then when we look at his characters, he's gone for 2 Dreadfiends, who are brilliant characters in my opinion. Both high movement and they hit on 3s, and they have Vicious and Nimble, so going to be hard to get rid of those. 14-16 as well, so they're going to be getting around my flanks. And a Butcher Flesh Ripper. Again, another nimble character with movement 6, great for this scenario. The Nightstalker army has also got the special rule of stealthy, pretty much across the board, and the scenario map that was pre-generated had a lot of hiding places. With that in mind, when I built my list, I didn't think I'd be taking too much shooting. The Nightstalkers are a really good list, and what Trevor's done here is, I think, play to their strengths in terms of having some hard-hitting units that you can hide behind his army, and lots of good flankers, and essentially lots of high-scoring units. So we're going to look at my Force of the Abyss. My first thought was I didn't want to have too much shooting, although the Forces of the Abyss are a very good shooting army. Because of the scenario and my suspicion that he would be taking the Nightstalkers. So with that in mind, I've gone for 2 units of Abyssal Ghouls as essentially quarter holders, just there as a bit of chaff, but also they do unlocks. A horde of Molochs, one of my favourite units, very hard hitting, but also if I had come up against something with Phalanx, then I had something to counter there. Then the unit that I've used mostly in this scenario, which are the Tortured Souls. I think they're brilliant at 120 points. Key point is that they are pretty good at grinding with Life Leech 2. They can fly, so some good ranged support. They don't have nimble, so you have to be careful how you use them. But the big thing they have is unit strength 2, which in this scenario is going to be great for taking those quarters. Abyssal Horsemen with the Boots of Striding, pretty standard. Again, some pretty good range threat, and they can take units off pretty well. And then a new unit that I've started using for this scenario was Hellhounds. The reason I went with them is because it's an 1800 point list, so there isn't going to be necessarily a lot of units on the table. So the Hellhounds, with their nimble and movement 9, may be able to get around the back and flank and control parts of the table. I also gave them the Potion of Caterpillar, which I think is an ideal complement to them. Then when I look at my characters, I've got for 2 characters, which is the Abyssal Champion with Lightning Bolt and Wings, and Manifestation of Veil. So as I said previously, I was of the opinion that I would be playing Nightstalkers, and the scenario and the terrain also meant that shooting other than Lightning Bolt wasn't going to be very effective. So that was why I went for Lightning Bolt there, to give me some range support. And the other point about facing Nightstalkers is sometimes they don't take characters that will prevent you getting around the back. So Bale and my Tortured Souls and the Abyssal Champion should be able to fly over and get into some nasty positions for him. The other bit that's also worth noting is that the Force of the Abyss all have Mind Thrust, which is a special rule that means they're using your leadership if within 12 of an inspiring unit. So I didn't have too much inspiring on the table because I've had that work against me in the past. So let's have a look at the scenario, which in this case was Control. In Control, the battlefield is broken into 6 parts, which you can see is illustrated by these 2 little crosses here to help you identify which of the 6 segments you're in. And you score 1 point for each unit, for each segment you control by having the highest unit strength in there. And you get 2 points for controlling the centre section in your opponent's deployment zone. It's the majority of footprint in that segment that determines whether its unit strength is there. And it's one of my favourite scenarios in reality. A real trick to it is getting the second turn, because if you've got that last turn to be able to move into a segment that your opponent hasn't been able to control, you've got a much better chance of winning. Additionally to that, if you're going first, you won't know where your opponent's going to do, so you have to split your army out quite a lot. So let's have a look at the terrain for this battle, which is pre-generated as part of the Call to Arms tournament. I quite like that, and as in other rounds, this terrain has not been a disappointment. It's an unusual setup, but it forces a different style of play. The first thing to note is the amount of height 9 blocking or difficult terrain items, so the shooting is going to be difficult, which is why I chose an army that was essentially mainly combat and movement. Areas of the battlefield to note is here. This blocking terrain is going to make it very hard to get through and get units in there, unless you have any flyers, which I do. We'll also note the bunker areas here and here. So getting anything behind those is going to be pretty tough, because that is height 9 blocking. So essentially you're going to have to go around the side. Other than that, the battlefield is highly cramped, and there's going to be line of sight is going to be hard to get at all times. Right, so both armies have deployed. I rolled off to place first and chose south, and I had less drops by 2 or 3 to Trevor, so he would have quite a lot of units to place after I deployed. The key things I was trying to do was to get into a flanking position, so I placed both my Tortured Souls here to get over that terrain in front of it and get around the sides. I placed Bale in the middle, giving me options, but more importantly, it meant that I could run at this blocking terrain and he wouldn't be able to hit me. So it may restrict his movement forward, or it would help me easily get behind his army. And other points of deployment are my Abyssal Ghouls back here in a difficult to get to position, but I tried to place them in line with the edges of that segment. The reason being that I could choose later on in the game as to keep them in the middle or move them out to the sides. I also deployed my Hellhounds with the Caterpillar on the right hand side here, with the 2 Tortured Souls. The reason behind that was essentially, even though he had deployed a large part of his force here, he actually had 2 or 3 units at the end, and he loaded this area with units after I'd deployed, so making it hard for me to get there. But they still have the Pathfinder, and their movement and nimble means that they can potentially get out of the way of that force in front of them. So, what's my plan? Well, I feel that if we break the table down into the 6 segments, I feel I can control these 2 quite easily with my Tortured Souls. But he's got a lot of force that's going to come into the middle here and down this side here. So what I'm going to try and do is fly these round the side here and flank into the middle. I'm going to try and hold him up here as long as possible. Maybe fly one over the top and take this section, or at least challenge it. I'm going to try and get Bale to go here and then challenge behind the armies this way. And I'm going to try and hold him off as long as possible here with my knights because of their ranged attack. So essentially, I'm not going to engage, I'm going to back off. And I'm going to just let him come forward as I get round his flanks. I'll do a similar thing with the Molochs here as well. And hopefully at the end of it, I will have the left-hand side of the battlefield and ideally the both middle sections too. So turn 1. I won the roll to go first and let Trevor take it. As I explained earlier, I feel going second in control is a real advantage. And Trevor's go was pretty simple. He moved everything forward here a little bit tentatively, so keeping out of range of these units on the right hand side. And he also moved these forward here, which I would thought you might hold back to stop me coming over the side there. But just a gentle move forward from Trevor, and as he had no shooting, that was the end of his first turn. So, my turn 1, what did I do? Well, again, pretty simple. Move these up to the beginning of the blocking terrain because I couldn't get over it in the first turn, but they are pretty defended, and I'm hoping to come over next turn. I moved Bale into a position where he was not going to be charged, but he was threatening this way. And I just moved these guys around just to keep out of range, but just keeping that threat going forward, so hopefully keeping these guys back. Again, I just moved my knights slightly further forward, just increasing the threat range into here, just giving you something to think about. And that was all of my movement. Then in the shooting phase, I shot at these Reapers, but didn't do any wounds, which is a shame because they've not got a lot of wounds, and I was hoping to pick them off slowly as they advanced. That was the end of my turn 1. So in Trevor's turn 2, what did he do? Well, he moved most of his units here forward out of the charge of Bale here, which was good. He moved his Butcher Flesh Ripper forward, challenging here, which kind of put pressure on me, so I needed to move forward rather than sticking around. He moved these guys forward a touch, threatening my units down the bottom, so I needed to make a plan there. And he turned to face with the Reapers this way, so making sure Bale couldn't just get behind the back. But as no shooting, it was again a pretty straightforward turn 2. So, my turn 2, what did I do? Well, I moved one unit of the Tortured Souls into the zone on the left hand side. Not able to turn them because they're not nimble, but they'll play later on. I moved these guys over to the left hand side, out to the range of his Butcher Flesh Ripper. I moved my knights back, just keeping that threat in. And I repositioned these guys just a little, again just trying to protect the position, but I moved one unit of Tortured Souls up to challenge his Phantoms here, but out of charge of these units. So it was, if he wanted to charge me, he could. So I started to get into a flanking position. I also turned Bale to face this way now, so putting pressure on that flank because I thought it needed support. And in the shooting phase, I shot at his guys on the hill, but didn't do any wounds. And then I shot at these Reapers, doing 1 wound, but not causing a waver or break. So what did he do? Well, he again continued to progress these units in the front. He split his force this way, so coming into my Molochs, with the Butcher Flesh Ripper as well coming. He moved into a defensive position here, protecting his Butchers. Could have charged the flank here of my Molochs, but didn't choose to, which I was quite happy with. And he moved the Reapers here to face Bale, so again protecting the flanks. So I was quite pleased that he'd taken action to protect his flanks because it was slowing him up. However, I was going to have to come up with a plan soon because he was getting close. So what did I do in my turn 2? Well, again, back the Knights off, out of charge range. I moved these Tortured Souls to be facing to the right hand side to start putting a bit of threat on. I moved these Tortured Souls up into that flanking position I talked about. I moved these guys into the rear of his Butchers, so just threatening him to come forward. I had to charge to hold him in, so I charged one of my Tortured Souls at his Phantoms there, and then this was a difficult decision because I wanted to get Bale around the back, but I couldn't move him into the back and turn essentially. So I decided to charge his other Phantoms here. Probably could have at this point actually used my Hellhounds to do a double charge there because I could have positioned to protect them at a later stage, but I thought I'll keep them back, maybe trying to move into this section of the board later on, just stretching his force. And my shooting phase, I shot these unit of Phantoms of Reapers here, doing 2 wounds and wavering them, which was nice. And then in the combat phase, Bale did 3 wounds to the Phantoms. They charged but didn't get a waver, and the unit of Tortured Souls, who were hindered to be fair, didn't do any wounds on the Phantoms, so they were now free to fly over if they wanted, but they couldn't see because they're the same height as my Tortured Souls. So what did he do on his turn 4? Well, he brought his Dread Fiend onto the middle of the battlefield, giving more pressure onto my Molochs. He brought these guys forward a little bit, but again, just keeping them back, which is what my Knights wanted to do. He charged, double charged the Tortured Souls there with the Dread Fiend and with the Phantoms, and he continued to move these guys to really threaten my Molochs. I wasn't going to be able to get away because of the positioning of his troops. It meant that this route was now blocked off for me with my Hellhounds, so he was getting into a good position. He also turned the Reapers there to challenge on Bale, so he was looking in a pretty dangerous position. And at this phase, I was thinking that it wasn't looking very good. I needed to get some combats going my way, otherwise this was all going to be over. So, my turn 4, what did I do? Well, as throughout the game, I moved my Knights back out of the woods, which basically meant that he could only charge me with his Scarecrows if he wanted. I charged the unit of Scarecrows there with my Molochs because I had to. I rear charged the Butchers and front charged with my Hellhounds, hoping to break them, and I countercharged against his Phantoms there. In the shooting phase, I shot at the unit of Reapers that were on the hill, causing 4 wounds and killing them, which was pretty good. And that was all the shooting. Then in combat, as you can see, the Molochs killed the scarecrows there and turned to face so that nothing was in my flank. The combat against his butchers did 8 wounds, which I was relatively happy with, but didn't break them. And then Bale killed the phantoms and turned to face this way, but it meant that if his Reapers were going to charge me, they would have a hindered charge, which meant he had a chance of surviving. Turn 5, what did he do? Well, he rolled the wild charge on both of his scarecrows here, but didn't get the charge off, so that worked out well for me. He charged all 3 units at my Molochs. He charged my Hellhounds here, and he charged at Bale. Then in the combat phase, he destroyed my Molochs here, which I thought he would do. They didn't do very well in this game, but he only did 4 wounds on Bale, who passed his leadership check and was free to wreak havoc next round. And he killed my Hellhounds, which I thought he would do, but he turned his units, his butchers, back up here because he didn't want getting rear charged by the Tortured Souls. But at this point, it was looking pretty dicey, and I needed to start getting into some good positions. So what did I do? Well, I brought my Tortured Souls around here to challenge the combats down the bottom. I charged in with my Knights against his Scarecrows and used my boots, hoping to break them. And I charged the ghouls on his Scarecrows. The reason being trying to block them up. And I charged the front and of his butchers with Bale and with my Tortured Souls. In shooting, I shot at the Reapers that were there, doing 4 wounds and killing them, which was pretty lucky, and I was very happy with it. And then in combat, so my Knights didn't break the Scarecrows. They got a double 1, which was pretty bad because I wanted to control that bottom quarter. And I did 2 wounds on his other Scarecrows, again not breaking them. I destroyed his butchers over here and turned my Tortured Souls to be facing to challenge this way if I wanted, maybe even fly into a scoring zone, but also protecting Bale. It was getting pretty tight, but at this point we both had little time left on our clock, so we were moving pretty quickly. So what did he do in turn 6? Well, he double charged my Knights here. He charged his Dreadfiend and his Phantoms at my Tortured Souls, and he moved into a scoring position with these units here. In the combat, he caused 6 wounds to my Knights and then rolled a 10 to kill them, which I was disappointed with, but these things happen. And he did 3 wounds to my Tortured Souls, but not breaking them, which I was happy with. In my turn 6, I just basically tried to get the points for the table quarters. We both used most of our clock up by this time, so even if there was a turn 7, it was unlikely we were going to be able to do anything. So what I did was I counter-charged here, I moved into the middle centre and moved back there. I moved back with these Tortured Souls and I flew Bale over to the centre section. And then in combat, in shooting, I shot at his Scarecrows there, killing them because they were pretty wounded anyway, and I did some more wounds on this Scarecrow in here but didn't kill them, and that was the end of my turn. I rolled for a turn 7 but we didn't get one, so it was a solid victory to the forces of the Abyss. So how did it end up? Well, we rolled for a turn 7 but didn't get one, but we both ran out of time, so it wasn't going to play in. So I had this section, and this section. The unit strength 2 of the Tortured Souls really helped. And we contested this section, and Trevor had here and here. So that meant that I managed to get a win of 4 points to 2. So let's have a look at the game in action replay. And there you have it. The Forces of the Abyss victorious in 25 seconds. Conclusion. So the game's over. Let's see how it went. So how did my plan go? Well, I got the second turn, which was the main part of my plan. But I think it's fair to say that in this scenario that it's such a heavy benefit, and it really worked out for me having that last turn 6 to be able to choose where I was going to put my scoring units. I did manage to get around the back on both the left and the right hand side, and that slowed him down and gave me some beneficial combats, so that went well. I kept my units away. My knights did well, backing off, but my Molochs did less well. And I think that if I was to play it again, I'd really like to work out how I could better use the Monarchs and the Hellhounds as well. But I did manage to pick up 2 units of Reapers, which was always my plan, and the Abyssal Champion did exactly what he was set out to do. He didn't actually get into any combat, which he is very good at, so maybe I overpaid for him, but 2 units of Reapers is a fair reward. So the final result, well, it was a Forces of Abyss win, 21-9. We both killed half of each other's armies about in terms of points, and I got 4 bonus points to his 2. But it was a great game. Really enjoyed it. I enjoyed Control. It's a good scenario, and one that you can really think about. But Trevor was a really great lad. Enjoyed playing him, and he was very fair throughout the game. Knew his stuff. And I wish him luck for the rest of the tournament. So what can we say we learned? Well, my big issue, I spent a lot of time trying to get Bale into positions where I could shoot with him and get him into threatening positions. But actually I would have been far better off just looking for positions. His shooting did very little in the game, and I did get myself into a bit of a sticky situation where I was forced to charge his Phantoms. So I think trying to do 2 things at once was a bit of a mistake. I'm going to try and use him more decisively in the future. I did a lot of single charges where a double charge would have guaranteed the destruction of a unit, and that would have reduced his unit strength, and it's no guarantee that he'd come back. So try and get some double charges in. I think that's a good call. And this is one for both of us really, but there were a number of times when I was able to get behind Trevor's army because his positioning wasn't covering off angles, or he could have turned just to close down some of that space. I'm thinking on the left-hand side where I was able to get both my Tortured Souls over that terrain and into flanking positions. And in the first turn where I managed to get Bale into the middle of the board and turning there. So I think covering your angles, looking what you're going to be able to charge next turn, what space you can control, is a real, really important lesson to take away from this.
Right, so that's it. A solid victory for the Forces of the Abyss. I hope you enjoyed the battle. It was a lot of ebb and flow again. Wasn't sure how it was going to go in the middle there, but managed to pull it through. If you've enjoyed the battle report, please subscribe to the Geeky Goblins channel. And if you have any comments, please leave them below. And I'll come back to you when I can. So look after yourselves. Take care. See you soon.